Good morning, everybody. Well, we've got another rainy day here in the Bay Area, California. Today is March 21st, 2018, and man, I am so thankful for all this rain we've been getting. We really need it. You can see over here this patch of greens that's growing, which all volunteered themselves. I had a little compost pile going over here, and we've got 4 or 5 different varieties of tree kale collards growing up. They're all looking extremely healthy. None of these are staked up. But this kind of stuff just brings a smile to my face. And check out the cardoon growing in the background. So a huge patch of cardoon developing over here. Initially, I had just one plant that I had transferred as a pup from another cardoon growing in the yard. Now there's 3 growing, so I'm gonna have to transplant again. It's taking over this little clumping bamboo over here. If you're not familiar with cardoon, it's the cousin of the artichoke plant. Produces a very similar looking flower, attracts many bees. The stalks of the plant have edible qualities. They do require a bit of processing. The various different Kapoor basil plants that I protected with the cups throughout the garden are surviving just fine. The mint hugel pots are looking really good. Everything's pushing out a bunch of new growth with these rains. We got a little potato patch in front of the walking onions and larkspur rocket over there. One of the trees that did suffer some damage when we had those freezing conditions over the course of a couple weeks was this pomegranate, which had just started to put out some new foliage, and everything on the tree had died back, and I was a bit concerned as to how much it was going to hinder the tree. But at this point, it's now flushing out a bunch of new foliage all over the plant, so it looks like perhaps just a minor setback. Hopefully we still get a fruit set off of these pomegranate trees. I've got a couple different ones growing back here, but if not, at least we know that the tree has survived and we'll be back again. At the base, I've got another basil plant. Over here, on both sides of the pathway, we've got some Brussels sprout plants, and these are all doing very well. You can see some of the damage on the leaves. Those are caused by the pill bugs. But once the plants reach this level of maturity in my garden, they never succumb to the pill bugs damage, so I'm not too worried about that. Here we've got some comfrey re-emerging. White mulberry tree springing back to life, pushing out some nice foliage. Over here we got the Santa Rosa plum tree, and you can see all the flowers are now post bloom, and even when you look very closely you don't see any fruits developing on the tree. But I'll show you an example of how I know there's fruit developing here. Here's a post bloom. We'll break that one off, and underneath the petals there we got a little viable fruit starting to form. So another success story, you might say, and how I went about protecting some of my fruit trees that were in bloom during those freezes that we had that lasted a couple weeks. We'd gotten down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and basically overhead watered these plants throughout the evening with a fine mist sprinkler, which froze the entire tree. If you happen to miss that, I'll put a link below this video in the description box. Check that out. But that created an endothermic effect which actually protected the tree from the freezing cold. Cold hardy kiwis are breaking out of dormancy. Still got to get my trellis built over here. Just waiting for the ground to dry up a bit. Pineapple quince tree is looking beautiful with all the white blossoms. And the foliage is almost fluorescent green. I really just love the structure and the look of this tree. Now the fruits themselves aren't that edible right out of hand, but when you process them, they can become a really delicious dessert type fruit. My various patches of mugwort that I have planted throughout the design are springing back to life. Many reasons to grow mugwort in your garden. The 2-in-1 planting of blackjack and brown turkey fig are now starting to push out some new growth. Because I didn't do all that much pruning on these trees, there's a lot of second-year wood, so I'm hoping to get a breba crop, which is the first of 2 different crops that you can get off a fig tree. And right next door, we've got an autumn olive. If you've never heard of this plant, a lot of folks might mistake it for being an actual olive and have lack of interest because of that. This is actually a fruiting berry shrub. And right now, this one, along with the other two I have grown in the landscape, are loaded with flowers. Some great benefits to this plant is that it can withstand very cold temperatures down to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And the plant itself actually fixes atmospheric nitrogen into the soil. Those nitrogen root nodules that develop on the plant help to feed itself and surrounding plants. So look into the autumn olive. And I already did all my thinning on the Florida King peach tree. Next door, we've got the white nectarine, still with many blossoms, looking beautiful. All the trees here are looking really good. Some of these varieties that were looking quite sparse because I had to do certain amounts of pruning in order to make sure that I'm keeping the tree shapely for future years, aren't going to probably put off that many fruits. I've got maybe 3 or 4 different trees that we may only get a few fruits from. But I'm very happy with the progression of this project, this hedgerow of dwarf, semi-dwarf fruit trees growing over here. Everything's looking really good. Here's a huge artichoke plant. Spread is about 6 feet wide right now. This is the globe artichoke. Wonderful variety, not just for its beautiful ornamental flowers, but as an edible crop, eating the artichokes, it also makes a wonderful ground cover, helping to shade out the sun from drying out the soil. This black Tartarian cherry was in full bloom just a few days ago, and now it's beginning to reach the post-bloom stage. Some of the gorgeous white flowers are now starting to brown and wilt. But I'm really looking forward to the first harvest of cherries from this tree. It's been growing here now for 7 years, so very slow to produce. We also had a couple setbacks and damaged limbs I had to take care of, but everything's looking really good right now. And over here we have the mother abundant tree kale. Been growing here now for several years. Check out the stalk. This thing's holding on. It just keeps going. Right now it's in flower. The bees have been loving up this plant. And later on in the season, these seed heads will drop, or I'll harvest them, and these leaves will become much larger. Below that, we've got a gooseberry, just starting to break dormancy. And I don't mean to go on and on, but I just want to give you guys progressional updates as to how things are growing out here. Here's another autumn olive, again producing many, many flowers. Just a beautiful specimen of a plant. Below that, we've got yarrow, little patch of yarrow being protected by one of these whiskey barrel hoops. There are flower bulbs that have been planted out all throughout the garden design, which will be showing up real soon. I'm also hoping to start to see the emergence of some wine cap mushrooms with all this rain, and now that the weather's starting to warm up a bit. But check out the purple tree collards on this hugelkultur mound here. These are prime for the picking right now. This time of year and for the next couple months or so. The leaves are nice and purple and sweet, just absolutely delicious. You can also eat the flowers, which are edible, the seed heads, which are a floret similar to broccoli. And this mound here on the left, which is a bit more sparse, I'm going to be transferring some of these purple tree collards over to the other mound, and I'm going to be planting this out all with Armenian cucumbers, which are actually in the melon family, closely related to cantaloupes. The various potato bait traps I set up for the pill bugs have yet to capture any pill bugs. But the main thing is that these cups are helping to protect the small seedlings. So, happy to report so far so good. I'm going to be continuing this technique to transfer some other small transplants out to the garden. Goji berries are booming. Little berries forming all over this plant. And it's looking like we're going to have an even more abundant harvest of gojis this year. Now here's another huge dino tree kale. This thing here is, let's see, it's taller than I can reach. So I'm guessing it's over 10 feet tall right now. And I just want to give you guys a few tips on how you too can grow massive green vegetables like this. And don't fret if you're unable to do what I'm trying to share with you here in regards to growing your own large varieties of greens. I will be doing my best to share these varieties. Right now I'm propagating them out, folks, so it's going to take a little while to get my stock built up so that I can offer them on a consistent basis. But if you want to grow your own unique variety of greens from scratch on your own property, but you're going to have the most resilience for your particular plot of land, here's how you can go about doing it. For year one, you're going to want to grow several different varieties of Brassica oleracea that are vigorous growers. Some of the different varieties I'd suggest growing would be plants like the purple tree collards, walking stick kale. There's a variety of Portuguese kale known as tronchuda, puts off massive leaves and can get quite tall. Merit collards, if you were fortunate enough to get some seeds in the past, I may be offering those up again real soon. Lacinato kale, which can actually grow quite large. If you can grow all these different types of varieties, or a few of them, all at the same time, then as they begin to go into flower at the same time, you're going to get some natural cross-pollination occurring as the bees fly from flower to flower, spreading the pollen. Like right here, for example, I've got a dino tree kale which is kind of flopped over, and instead of pulling it out, I let it just lay here for now so that the bees can come around and jump on the pollen and cross-pollinate with some of the other plants before I gather the seed. And then once the seeds on the plants are fully mature, collect them and label them from the various plants, plant them out the following year, and through selective breeding, choose the most vigorous, healthy looking plants that following year, and repeat the process, and do this a few years over and over again. You may get lucky the first year right off the bat and get something absolutely amazing. It may take a few years for those crosses and the right seed to develop, but that's how you can go about doing this on your very own property. It's very fun and exciting. And one of the greatest benefits to doing it this way is that after years and years of growing plants and collecting seed, regrowing them on your property, those seeds become better acclimated to your specific climate zone, your specific growing region, and the plants become much more vigorous, tolerant of the different conditions, and you end up with the strongest specimen. My second tip is to plant your tree kale and tree collard varieties in full sun. They really do like a lot of photosynthesis. Don't worry about bolting or anything like that. These plants snap right back in to producing lots and lots of leaves. And while it is in flower, you can actually pick off some of the florets and the flower heads, and those are completely edible. And the ones remaining, you can collect seed and continue to grow out interesting varieties. And I just wanted to say that tree collards and tree kale are different from each other. Some of the plants that I refer to as tree kale that are growing back here have been crossed with some different kale varieties, but have the traits of the purple tree collard and the walking stick kale in them. This particular tree kale here has got a very large light green stalk on it, and I'm seeing traits of the walking stick kale in this plant, and therefore I refer to it as such. But overall, I don't think it much matters whether you call it a tree kale or a tree collard. Now this young dino tree kale that I'm growing, as you can see, has these deep purple veins going throughout the leaf. And at some point on some of these plants, the leaves starts to develop a purple tinge like this. So between the purple tinge on the leaf, the purple vein through the leaf, and then also the purple on the stalk, it's pretty obvious that this variety has crossed specifically with the purple tree collard. And here's a closer look at some of these purple tree collards. My third tip is to plant in a well-draining, nutrient-dense soil. So if you're starting off with some hard clay or some sandy soil that needs some nutrition added to it, throw in some worm castings, throw in some rock dust minerals, add in some fresh compost. Work that in really good, as you'll be providing everything that the plant needs to really thrive and survive for the long term. My fourth tip is to fertilize these trees from time to time, primarily through foliar feeding. This is a very cost-effective, easy way to feed the plants. They end up getting the majority of the nutrition that way. And you're going to want to foliar feed in the early morning or the late evening hours, not in the midday, when the stoma is open and receptive to those nutrients. And my three favorite solutions for foliar feeding my plants are the liquid kelp, fish emulsion, and a homemade compost tea brew. And you can do a combination of a couple or all three of them at the same time, but the results are tremendous. I highly recommend doing that. Again, look at this volunteer plant here. Huge leaves. And my fifth recommendation is to stake your plants up. So you can see here, this is a 5-foot T-post, and the plant is already outgrowing that T-post. This plant here is now about 7.5 feet tall or so. So I would have been better off putting a 7-foot T-post next to this plant. That should have been suffice. Like over here on this Dino Tree Kale variety, I've got a 7-foot T-post holding that up. Without it, the plant would have fallen over, probably at about 5 feet or so, and we never get to fully enjoy the stature of the plant. So staking them up is really important. So if you do those 5 things on your property, you're surely going to develop something really special like what's happened here. And I just want to add that I enjoy eating every single one of these green leafy vegetables growing back here. They all have unique flavor. They're all very tasty, especially in the colder months. So having gigantic leaves like this means pretty much an endless supply of food. And we do sautés, make kale chips, green smoothies, give some away. And of course the chickens enjoy them very much as well. Anything they can reach, they will go after. Well, that's going to conclude today's video. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'll be talking to you again real soon. Take care. And yes, I am going to be collecting seed from all the different varieties here, marking them as such. And I'm going to be offering those up, folks. So if you don't have the time or the space to do everything that I'm recommending here, don't fret. There's going to be seed varieties that I'm going to be offering up in a very short time, as well as cuttings.